The goal of the next sometime, and we'll take some questions as well. You guys in the room, feel free to holler in the middle, but is to talk about the impacts of AI, especially for us as technologists, because we get to wield that power. We'll go through some of the things that are happening and the realization that it's already in our lives. But then what do we need to do to ensure that the horror stories we see in the newspapers about how bad AI can be don't happen, because that responsibility is ours in the tech world. This is IBM's career site. It is not a keyword search. If you try to find a job at IBM, you get hit with a conversation with Watson, right? It talks to you, it asks you questions, and then it suggests jobs that might be good for you at the company. It's one of 200 plus HR applications out there in the market from various companies that introduce AI into the world of recruiting. I spent a few years taking Watson into the world of HR. And what was interesting was to see that candidates trusted an AI system more than they trusted a human being. And it happens a lot, right? You're like, well, how bad can that be? It's a machine. It doesn't know me. It's not judging me. We at IBM use Watson to give career advice to our employees. Every one of us has it in our pocket. She is called Micah. She's brilliantly named because it's my career advisor. Some engineer named her. I'm kidding. But that's what she's called, and she's got a personality, and you can ask her questions. We even programmed some dad jokes into her. But she looks at options and gives you career advice. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Lots of positive benefits of AI and HR. For example, the one place we saw a marked difference is introverts prefer talking to a machine than extroverts. Extroverts talk to people in the water cooler. Introverts are trying to read and figure out what to do. When you give them a conversation, they get that much more willing to have a career conversation. So there were a lot of positives with it. But we had to go through a lot of work to ensure that these environments that we were creating were truly trustable. There's 200 odd companies that have gotten funding for HR and AI, and they're going to be in our lives whether we like it or not, because they're behind the scenes. The question is, do we trust it? This is my day job, literally. We use AI for cybersecurity. On an average, we've noticed that if you've got SOCs, which are security operations centers, have a lot of security analysts. The two things that are paramount is A, you catch every attack that comes in, breach that comes in, and B, you do it in a time that matters. It's that simple, right? On an average, the human efficiency is anywhere between 70 to 80% to do that. With AI, we are at over 95%, right? And we do it in 1/10th, 1/15th, in some cases, 15 minutes versus 3 months kind of time frames. Huge positive. But again, this is an area where a lot of people are talking about AI in the world of cyber and in multiple different ways. Who's building that AI? Have they thought about every possible eventuality? Have they thought about the outcomes that could be affected because you did not think of a 360-degree view of that attack? Might have a higher efficiency. Is the human being still better? Maybe. Don't know, right? I have a point of view. I prefer the AI, but then I also know I've got to wield that power a bit more systematically. We talk about healthcare, and I'm making someone's life miserable by walking on stage instead of standing in one spot because you're moving your cameras around for me. So I'm apologizing for it. I'm not saying I won't stop walking. In the world of healthcare, we do a lot of work in the world of oncology, but I've seen this in hospitals myself with the researchers, which is the AI machines are able to detect patterns far more systematically than sometimes a human eye would, as trained as that eye might be, because you're not remembering 500,000 images at the same time and picking a pattern. And that helps in oncology research, and that helps in time frames or detection time frames, and it's significantly helping in things like breast cancer, as an example. Again, has to be done systematically. We're starting to see information in studies where the study itself didn't include all the possible demographic capabilities that should have been thought of when you went into that research, which basically means you've looked at people of all age ranges, sexual orientations, you've looked at geographic disparity. When you train that system on a given disease, otherwise it won't know how it manifests differently in different types of people. That is technological bias, right? If you've kind of limited who you've included in your study. No different than what happened in the past. You still have those biases in clinical research, but now you have an exponential impact because you're taking this AI system and deploying it in hundreds and thousands of hospitals around the world. So the reason some of this matters is because of the breadth of where you might take it. Might be a bit of an eye chart, but here is what C-level executives think AI does for you. About halfway down in that list is, and this is an Harvard Business School article, it suggests AI will make better decisions. Goes to the point I said earlier, people tend to trust it more for some reason, natural or unnatural. But our executives that are buying AI systems, that are deploying AI systems, think that about 1/3 of the times it's going to make better decisions. The last one is the scary one. It thinks that they can reduce the headcount required to solve a problem because now they've got AI, right? And there will be shifts and things like that, but the reason for putting this up is saying that there is an inherent belief that a lot of problems that couldn't be solved are going to be solved by AI. And I just told you of ways that they do get solved that couldn't be solved before, right? You couldn't have a conversation with every single candidate. Now you can. You couldn't correlate between hundreds of thousands of symptoms across 170 countries to predict what a disease was. Now you can. You can't look at vulnerabilities with human beings and breaches at the speed and scale of AI. Now you can. But there could be a problem with that. When we adopt AI, the construct is, well, can it be biased? It isn't the first thing you think about when you get a recommendation on your phone on what shoes to buy. You think, oh, cool, they know what's going on in my head. But some machine came up with that and made a suggestion. The question is how? What did you give it? Did it prepare? Did it protect your privacy? Who else knows about it? And might have been right for you. Was it right for somebody else? Right? So bias needs to be in our conscious. Now I'm going to stop, at least for the people in the room. How many of you think about bias when you think of AI? Like, is that, when you think of AI, is it a good or bad thing? Like, I've got two hands in the back. My kind of people, paranoid souls, just as paranoid as I am. Can't be in the world of security and not be paranoid, so it's just a way of life. I'll give you a funny story. It's funny as the after fact, but just to make a point on bias. As an experiment, a European team somewhere, it's been, I think, about a couple years, decided to train an AI system to pick the winner of a beauty contest. Okay? They decided, we're going to train it. Beauty contests are the most subjective things on the planet. We're going to make an objective decision-making process. We're going to train an AI system. Anyone want to guess what happened? That AI system had a preference of skin color. And it was really visible based on the last 10 people it picked. And they're like, what happened? How did the AI system get bad? Well, someone's got to train it, right? So the preferences matter, right? It was just an interesting experiment, but just it's funny because it's a beauty contest. I'm sure the people on stage were not very amused with it as we are right now, but it's still a problem. It highlights a problem. My favorite word that is used as an excuse is unconscious bias, right? I didn't mean to do it. I trained the AI system, but I didn't mean to be biased. By the way, all the bias that we talk about is truly unconscious, most of it. There's a few malicious people. Of course, there's a few malicious people. But most people are unconsciously biased. What does that mean? That I didn't know what the outcome of my thought process was going to be. So my actions weren't malicious in nature. They were meant to solve a problem. They had side effects. Really didn't mean to do it. Right? It's the stuff we walk around and say, sorry, I didn't mean it. That comes naturally when we have a problem. The point is, as engineers who are building these AI systems, how many people can we go say that to? Because the exponential impact of what we just did by building a machine is not 100 or 1,000-fold, it's million or more billion-fold, because you're possibly touching so many people. Which is why my take is, as technologists, we don't get to say that was an unconscious bias. We have a responsibility, given we've got that powerful of a tool, to be consciously unbiased. And that is way harder than you can imagine. So the rest of the conversation is really going to be about, well, how do you get consciously unbiased in the larger scheme of things when you're delivering software? Stephen Hawking's quote, right? And you've heard multiple quotes from CEOs across the board. The number one reason for bias in systems is the human decision-making that gets fed into these systems. Things that we were doing wrong get passed on. So a lot of potential with AI as far as we don't fall into the pitfalls. There's two large set of AI systems. You've got in the way they learn, right? They either learn in a supervised manner or they learn unsupervised. Two large categories. There's obviously subcategories. In supervised systems, you have human beings, data, algorithms all pulled together, higher influence of the human biases slipping into the technology that's being built. In unsupervised systems, you give it large swaths of data, and it's creating correlations that then lead to decision making. Here, it can make the same correlation errors that sometimes human beings do, of saying, everyone that is in this bucket has this behavior. Doesn't work the other way around. Just because you have that behavior doesn't put you in the first bucket. But correlations of that kind can be made by the system, which you need to watch out for. Obviously, it's based on what type of data and how much data you provide, right? Two large categories. So human decision-making that flows through, and human beings not providing the right data and the right context that flows through. It's not coming through as cleanly on the screens, I don't know. But this is all the human biases that are documented. There's 180 of them. There's one of them called the ostrich syndrome, which is my favorite. I love doing it, hide in the sand, didn't happen. But they fall into categories. They fall into categories of how much can I remember, your upbringing that caused you to believe something that is possibly a statistic majority being the truth. There's difference between truth and statistics, right? There's this urgency we have on acting fast, and so that creates a whole set of biases in the way we behave. We consider speed differently in decision making. And then we have this thing called gut feeling in terms of what is meaningful, right? Unfortunately, that accounts for nothing, really. in a larger scheme of things. Sometimes if you're trained and you've created muscle memory for doing something right, different from a gut feel, right? I'm sure you've had design meetings where you say, but I feel we should do that. And then somebody in the room probably checks you and says, yeah, but why, right? You can't do that to a machine. I'm not kidding. You should look this up. There's 180 known biases in human beings. And a lot of them can flow into what happens in our technology. So I put up a set of IBM principles. Reason for putting them up is you need to start with the ethics of the company or the individual that's building a system. You have to have some ethical values. We all do. Put them down, make them obvious. Make sure everyone follows them, right? Basic. For us, we put a few things on. We basically said we weren't going to try and replace a human being. The goal was to improve the outcomes, the end goal of that human being doing a given job. That is our current goal. That is the primary outcome we're looking for. We talk about data. Your data, when you give it to us to train a system, is yours. We're not going to take your data and give it to somebody else. You need to have a point of view on data, whatever that point of view is. You need to have a point of view on transparency. What does this thing do? How was it trained? What outcome are you getting from it? Where is it deployed? Where does it run? Just making it very obvious so that nothing's hidden, so you're not guessing, right? And when you pull all of that together, it starts telling you what my value system is. So if you are going to buy AI from me, you should check what my value system is every single time, right? I don't care who you go partner with. I don't care who you go buy it from. I don't care if you build it on your own. Make sure you're doing it based on some value system, some principles that you can stand up and talk to your customers about. Basic steps, right? And that starts creating guidelines, guardrails, if you want to call it that, for people in your teams and your enterprise that are building the systems and for your customers that are going to buy from you. Okay? Let's break it down. Step one is intent, right? I'll use something simple as an example. My very first slide was, hey, when you go to the IBM website, you can use a conversation with Watson to decide what job you should go apply to. If you think about intent, I could have two different intents. I could want to convince anyone who came to my website to apply for a specific set of jobs because I'm having a really bad time filling those jobs. So I'm going to point everyone in a particular ballpark. Works for me, doesn't work for the person I am conning into applying for something. My intent could be that I am going to give this individual the right advice based on their skill set because I can break down their resume into skills. Doesn't matter who they are, doesn't matter where they live, doesn't matter what they do, not looking at their visa status, just their skills, and pointing them to areas that might be interesting to ensure that their experience interviewing is for the right job. And if it doesn't work for them, they don't spend time. But they don't waste their time. They don't waste my time. I'm trying to get the right person for the right job. Different intent. And you could keep expanding this, right? I went from one evil one purposely and one very positive one. Every single thing you build has an intent. The ethics of that intent matter because that starts defining how you're going to build the algorithms that flow into that end goal, right? Define that intent. And if you are ever scared of showing or sharing that intent with somebody else, chances are it's not ethical. If you're willing to proudly state why you're doing something, invariably you're going to be in the good. Okay? So what you see below is the intent that IBM has, and we live by it completely, right? we were talking right before um, the session started about how the most everyone sees Watson is in the weather app because we use it in the weather company. They're like, I just want it to give me good weather. And I'm like, that would be biased. But the flip side, even in that case, you're like, oh, Watson can read stuff and make it better. We've got one of the largest armies of meteorologists behind the scenes that use Watson along with their day jobs to make it better, right? Like literally everywhere, this is meant as a tenant. The reason for the intent bit, by the way, every time you interact with a partner or anyone that's talking AI to you, you have to be able to ask them their intent, and you have to be able to feel comfortable that their intent is ethical to you because your value system might be different from theirs. Okay? Transparency. This is unbelievably important because trust is paramount in what you accept as, right. And you gain trust by passing through the walls of transparency. If I can tell you exactly how something's being done, then you are going to trust me enough that we can now partner. And that's what you want with the people you're working with, period. Okay? I'll go back to something I started with. There's a lot of HR examples, and I talked a little bit about this on being skills-based versus anything else. But in the world of security, as an example, how are we deciding and who is making the decisions that something is a vulnerability and something's not? What is the breadth? Where is it decided? Where do these people sit? What kinds of degrees do they have? We will tell you that literally if you ask us who built this, why was it built, what is it doing? And being able to be that transparent is critical to our partners, our customers, feeling the level of trust that, oh yeah, if those people had done it for me and the machine hadn't, I trust them. So if they've trained the machine, chances are, the machine is living by their morals and values and the same quality that they were, okay? So huge part of that. This is probably my favorite, data. Two large elements of it, right? The whole foundation of AI sits on data, right? I mean, we know that, we say that. There's two parts to it. One, data creates more bias than anything else. Training an AI system is like training a child. If you expose your child to only a very small segment of the world, only one news channel, pick one, I don't care which one, only one children's video, only one just like see Mickey Mouse all day long, right? I don't care what it is, pick one. Could be the most loving and ethical thing, could be the worst thing in the world, just pick one. Would you risk doing that? Would you ever risk doing that? Our whole philosophy, invariably as human beings, is to be diverse. You walk into a CHRO's office and you ask them, what kind of people are you trying to hire? You say, T-shaped skills. Why do you say that? Breadth and then depth in one thing. Everything we do is about ensuring 360 degrees. And then when you train a system that you're going to trust to make actions that affect your business, affect your lives, why would you not go out of your way to ensure it has the breadth? Why wouldn't you check whether an HR system is actually ensuring that when it's looking at resumes to train itself, it's got just as many male as female, just as many people from each geography, just as many people from the various universities. You aren't just getting, oh, all these people from Harvard, let's take their resumes. Why would you want that breadth? Because you're actually looking at all the data so you can make objective decisions. That is the number one problem with bias in AI, that we have a blind spot, and that blind spot makes it worse. And the place that blind spot comes from is data. The second thing we do, and it's probably like, ask this question with anyone you interact when you're thinking of an AI system. The second thing we do very often in the marketplace right now, Silicon Valley being the worst perpetrators of this, but around the world being bad perpetrators as well, is we think that client data is our data. Right? They used our product, I'm going to take their data. Every time when you sign something off that you use for free, what you're trading is your data, right? Every single time. There is no free lunch. You thought those brownies were free, God no. Wait till you leave. That is the most expensive thing we give away, right? At a company level, if I've got a product, pick product of choice. A lot of us use things on our phone on a daily basis. If they're taking my data and they're using it to sell something else to me, worse, they're taking my data and selling it to somebody else. Worse, they're taking their data and training an AI system on it. You thought the first two were bad? The third is worse, because you are training an AI system that is now going to take my crown jewels and give it to the world. Worst thing you could do, right? So you're breaching that trust that we were talking about that you wanted to build with your customers and kind of expanding it to everybody. So two sides to data, right? One, 360 degrees. It's the problem everywhere. It is why most facial rec algorithms do not recognize black women as well as they recognize white men. There's a 4 percentage points of a difference in most AI algorithms across that spectrum, and you put every other combination in the middle and you'll get that breadth. There's a reason why medical records tend to be suited for rich people in rich countries and the AI systems, because that's the data people have. Well, how does disease propagate? It generally starts in the poorest countries, in the poorest environments, and everyone's affected. If your data is biased and limited, you don't actually get the breadth, right? We have had 60 years of biased recruiting practices. The very tests that are given for guidance counseling are actually known to be biased against women. We've done it for a while, but there were other ways to fix that, sort of. You take those same behaviors and you feed it into AI systems that are going to do recruiting around the world. Companies are screwed. They're going to miss out on the best talent possible. I mean, we know which half is better, right? Come on. You didn't expect me to stand and talk about bias on stage and not say that. But it's everywhere, right? So, and you don't think about this, right? At the minute I talked about the healthcare data, I could see a lot of heads nodding. But did you actually ask that question when you walked into a doctor's office and they typed something in a computer and gave you a suggestion? Hey, is my demographic information part of the data you use to make that decision? You don't ask that question, right? That is where our problems are. So every bit of AI that you build, in the chips, in the storage, in the hardware, in the phones, in the devices, in the cameras, everywhere, every time you click on a button and give your data away, think about it. Be as paranoid as me and the two people in the back who raised their hands about bias. But more importantly, be part of the solution. And the last point, did you know this? Computer engineers know everything. They know about weather, they know about healthcare, they know about HR, retail. We just know everything. You guys are laughing. I know it's true, right? We start companies and we know everything, and then we train these systems, and then we're not going to need these SMEs ever again, right? When I say it in that way, you all smile, but think about it. Who are you buying from? Right? Think about who your last recommendation was and that you said yes to. It's like, oh, you have some app on the phone, food. Pick something, food, movie tickets, something small. You saw someone's recommendation and said, yeah, that sounds good. I'm going to go eat in that small alleyway restaurant because, the recommendation says, right? Now, it doesn't change your life. It might change your life, but it usually doesn't change your life if you go do that. If you don't know who's training your system, and whether it was 4 people and a dog that started a startup around the hallway and then put a really nice logo and built an app and now telling you what you should buy or what doctor you should go see, we have a problem, right? So I joke about this, but literally for in the valley, we just naturally feel this. We just naturally behave like this. So I'll tell you when my world changed in this case. I grew up in the world of data and AI. I grew up I know my blind spots with data. You live in that world. You know your statistical probabilities. Okay, I got my bearings right on AI. And then moved into the world of HR on a whim to take Watson to solve HR problems, and spent a lot of time with IBM CHRO and IBM's head of talent and stuff like that, and suddenly had this team of 40 behavioral scientists on my team. I have never felt so judged in my life on a daily basis, by the way. You walked into work and all 40 of them were wondering what you were thinking because of the color of your t-shirt. And I'm like, it's the only one that was clean. I learned more than I could have bargained for, because all of a sudden, I became a quack in human psychology as we started training these systems to do recruiting. So the first website, when we put it on, we started thinking about, well, what is the emotion of the person when they click on that? What emotion does the person go through? What feeling does the person go through when they're looking for a job? Are they doing it proactively? Are they just searching? None of that goes through the minds of the computer scientists who are trying to build that website to optimize it to give the right answer to a person. Like, well, your answer can't be right unless you know the context of the question. And just that simple statement made by a psychologist to the computer scientist in a room kind of lit a lot of light bulbs, right? And through a course of a year, as we trained the systems and we cross-trained the systems, and we realized why the answer was wrong, we started noticing the computer scientists in general started realizing what bias was, right? So if you think about why you hire someone, what is the number one reason you hire someone? Why do you hire someone? Not the company, as a manager. Because there's a hole in your team and there's pressure on your shoulders and you want the job filled now, right? For the most part. Whole bunch of work to do. Why does the company hire someone? Because they want somebody to build something really, really cool that's going to help make money, right? Unless you're working for the government and then you've got a different story, non-profit. Whole other story. But the point being, there are multiple outcomes that a single decision requires. And unless you have a subject matter expert that can take these outcomes and help you define what is ethical in that context and what is right, the computer scientist will make a mistake. If an AI system is trained just by a computer scientist, do not buy it. I don't care what it is. And I'm saying that as a computer scientist standing here in front of you. Because we were not trained in any of those things. We weren't trained in oncology, and we were not trained in HR systems, and we might be trained in cybersecurity, but not like the people on the ground fighting some of these things, right? So step one is you need a trifecta of a team. You need, and the third one's going to surprise you. You need the subject matter expert. You need the computer scientists. And then you need somebody who is a third party that's generally happens to be in the world of law, but IP protection, ethics, something of that nature, and they exist, right, in a company. And when you get that trifecta, and then you put the development team in the middle to bring the story together, you get an answer, right? In the absence of the subject matter expertise, the bias is going to creep in because we don't know what's right or wrong. That is where unconscious bias comes in, okay? I'll give you my security example. When we're building the next gen, we've got research projects all over the map on active and passive AI attacks that happen in the world of cyber. We have obviously core computer scientists that are AI experts. We have a worldwide trained set of SOC analysts and experts that are firefighters that you bring in when something goes wrong with the breach. Now, why does it matter that they're worldwide? Because what happens do you know how most breaches start? Security breaches have a pattern on a global scale. If you draw a map, you can literally see which country gets affected first and where they sit. And these people talk to each other. Like, we know the amount of days between an attack happening in the northeastern corridor of Europe before it hits the United States. There is a pattern. As a computer scientist focused on AI, you don't know that pattern. As somebody who fights crime on a daily basis in the field, you do, right? And so some of this, where people are geographically located, changes the way they firefight in cybersecurity. And so you need a 360-degree view of where it comes through. Then you need the data in that pattern as well. You need the data from Asia. You need the data from Northeast Europe. Western Europe has a different pattern. You know, the Russian elements have different patterns. All of that needs to come in at the same time. Federal governments have different data patterns. Some of them give it to you, some of them don't. And so you've got that data, which is across the globe, with the SMEs that are across the globe, computer scientists, legal team. I know more lawyers than I want to know. None of you are lawyers, right? Should have asked that first. But you need to know them. You absolutely need to know them where you stand. And thus, you have a higher hit rate when you solve the problem. We did the same thing with recruiting. We had IO psychologists that were recruiting experts on the ethics of recruiting from 8 different universities around the world in different parts of the world, because recruiting and ethical practices are different in different areas. How someone gets hired in Seoul is different from how they get hired in California. And there are positives to both that you want to pull out and train your system on. Then you get your algorithms built by that particular computer science team, and then you send it back such that you're getting this computer scientist sitting with, sorry, the SME sitting with the algorithm and cross-checking both answers. At a base level, you have to have an 80% hit rate where the answer is the same for both. And then the 20% might be, hopefully, the AI is better, right? You want the AI to do something that the other person says, the SME says, oh, didn't think of that. And that 20% comes from the fact that you were trained by SMEs in the different parts of the world. Okay, so I mean, there's science behind how this is set up. There's a science behind training, all of that. The question that all of you comprehensively need to ask is, well, who trained the system? Tell me who trained the system. Don't trust the system without that. Because that leads to, all of this leads to, do you trust the technology? I recently had the privilege of meeting a filmmaker who made a movie called Do You Trust This Computer? It's worth watching. It's a full-length documentary feature film, and Chris Payne made it, and you should absolutely go watch this movie, because it has the breadth from, you know, Elon Musk talking about it to Apple to X and to IBM. Like, everyone has a point of view on this. And you realize how complicated the word trust is. You thought it was complicated. AI just took it to a whole other level, right? So now, how many of you are paranoid about bias in your systems? Just one more? No, I'm just kidding. I'm creating paranoid souls everywhere I go. I don't think you need to be that paranoid, but you need to be vigilant. It's you know, there is a philosophy in cybersecurity architectures called the zero trust architecture. When you're trying to build a cybersecurity model, it isn't, oh, this group of people are all trusted, I'm going to let them in, I'm going to look for the bad guy or gal. It is every time someone walks in, you question, I don't have trust in you, prove who you are, then I'm going to let you do something. And it's not just for human beings, it's for APIs, it's for machines, it's for AI, because there's the two biggest issues in cyber, by the way, mistakes human beings make, just kind of stupidity, human stupidity, and AI attacks are like the two big things. So we can fix, I don't know. I don't think we can fix the human stupidity part anytime soon. The AI one we can work on. Anyone worried about trust in general? Machines? Do you trust machines around your house? That's interesting coming from this room, given what you guys do. Maybe, sometimes you get the best answers from the people making the machines, right? And so if you don't trust those machines, then what can you do to make them more trustable for your environments? That's the question you need. That's the outcome that you're looking for. So if you are an AI developer, the outcome that you're looking for is true trust, not fake trust, not perceived trust, true trust that you can hang your hat on at the end of the day, right? I have a video that I want you to watch. It's just a minute long. But our research team has a point of view, right? If you think AI was biased now, it's going to explode. It absolutely will. But that bias is what will kill those AI systems, because those AI systems naturally will end up being visibly negative. It's like catching the bad guy or gal in a Law and Order kind of movie or whatever it is. And at the end of the day, what you're going to be left with is bias-free AI, because the trainers will think differently, data will be thought of differently, people will be thought of differently, and hopefully the governments and the legal system will move along fast enough to kind of provide the guardrails required to ensure that that happens. So I'm just going to click the video. I think we tested it earlier, and it runs, and hopefully that'll reduce the paranoia and improve the positive vibes. Honestly, I can tell you that's true for me. For the first time in very long, I thought about what my biases were. Because it's impossible for us to grow up and not have some blind spot. It's not good or bad, it's just a blind spot. And hopefully what this does, so two things. We'll be able to build systems that test and gauge fairness and bias. And that'll be able to automatically catch. It's like good AI fighting bad AI, very Hollywood movie-esque. But more importantly, I think a lot of people are going to be aware of what bias is and where it sits and why it sits. And we're starting to train engineers on it in computer science in schools. So hopefully all of that will result in better world, world peace, world hunger gone, all that kind of stuff. But I'll wrap up by saying AI is here, whether you like it or not. It's in your life, it's affecting your decisions. And the only thing to think about is how do you control the side effects? One of those bad side effects being bias. And the more armed you are, the better off you're going to be to kind of win against that. Well, thank you for listening. I'm going to be around. I can answer questions. I don't know what your setup is. We're happy to answer some questions, and I'll be around later as well.